Hello guys, and welcome to week 1 of 3D animation and visualization. Today we're going to be going over the 12 principles of animation. Now, they're not a need to know, but they're pretty good to know. That will help you out in the future. Just have them in your mind, ruminating in the background when we do some of these future projects in Blender. So this will really help us in the future. The first principle is squash and stretch. Squash and stretch helps give the illusion of speed, weight, and movement. So in this GIF here, we could see this one ball on the right, no squash and stretch, and the ball on the the ball on the left, no squash and stretch, and the ball on the right has plenty of squash and stretch. And it kind of just gives it that that life that everyone kind of expects when they see an animation. Moving on, we have anticipation. Preparing the viewer for what's going to happen next can make an action more realistic. For example, a character might squat down before jumping. So you can kind of see this character, he braces himself before he sprints. And this helps kind of give a variation of the framing. Because for me, I always have a hard time animating because I don't know what to animate next. Like, I know I want to draw a character sprinting, but if you just draw a character sprinting, it kind of is a little boring. There's nothing to it. When you incorporate this bracing for action, it changes what the character's doing and gives it a more lively animation. It makes it feel more real. Number 3, we've got staging, placing character, scenery, and camera angles to create a visual story. Now, this is kind of, think of your rule of threes, your foreground, your background, what's going on in comparison to your character. Just telling a story and deliberately staging things to tell and convey your story the way that you want, or the way that emphasizes the emotion that you're trying to tell. And that's kind of what staging is. Straight ahead versus pose to pose. Straight ahead is creating all the frames of an animation in chronological order. This makes sense for smooth animations, but inconsistent drawings. And what I mean by that, if you look down here on the bottom left, you can see that this was drawn in chronological order. However, typically, if you do it this way, sometimes your drawings can get away from you. By this frame, usually this character might not have the same head. Like, the head could be circle, but now it's kind of oval because you can't draw a perfect circle every time. And that's kind of what I mean by that, is it can tend to get inconsistent, right? And so moving on, we have pose to pose, is drawing the major actions first. These are also known as keyframes, and then going back and filling the rest, also known as in-betweens. So actually, you can see here the 3 keyframes and the 4 in-betweens. As long as you get down these major poses, then you'll actually be pretty decent with the consistency of the drawing all the way through, because these in between happen so fast that our eyes can't really see what's going on. They can kind of see it, like where you could go like, oh, pause that. That was interesting, but they're not as noticeable as having these 3 frames being inconsistent. So it's good to keep that in mind. If you've actually had, or if you ever used Adobe Animate, we actually have this thing where you could take a picture or a shape and you can move it to, like, from the left to the right. And what that is called tweening. And that word actually comes from this right here, the pose to pose, also known as in betweens. It comes from that word. Follow through and overlapping action depicts how parts of an object move independently of each other. For example, a character's hair and clothing will continue to follow through after they've stopped running. So here you can kind of see this picture of like a squirrel or potentially like a raccoon's tail on a ball. And it's jumping around, it's got that livelihood, but the tail isn't doing the exact same thing that the ball is. And it's giving that variation of action between the two. Next, we have easy in and easy out, gradually changing an object's speed to convey realistic movements. So you can see here that easy is going, it goes like this, it goes slow, and then it goes fast by the time it hits here, and then it goes slow. So a good rule of thumb is the more frames you have, the slower the object's going. The less frames you have, the faster an object's going. Slow, fast, slow. And you can actually see this if you messed around with Adobe After Effects. You can actually see this in Adobe After Effects, and this is called Easy Ease, which is instead of having these frames be consistent, see how it's from here to here, it's twice as long, and from here to here, it's maybe about a quarter as long, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger gradually. This is what Easy Ease is. Most people would think that when you animate on, like, let's just say twos or threes, um, that it would be consistent. You always draw on the third frame. But actually, sometimes it's smarter, depending on the action that you want to convey, um, to actually use this approach rather than that consistent approach. Arcs, a set of guidelines that helps animators create realistic and fluid motion through their work. So starting out on the left, we have kind of a ball bouncing, and you can see the way each one is animated. Like these are the keyframes right here, and each one is animated on one of these arcs. So it's like it said in the definition, it's just a set of guidelines that helps you kind of direct where you're going. And we can see this on the Bugs Bunny Mickey Mouse hand, that it's kind of animated on arcs, and it follows this arc. Now, using a classic pendulum, we can actually see which looks more interesting and conveying to look at, which is you want it look flat, which kind of looks a little weird because the line actually looks like it gets shorter. But from here to here, the line actually doesn't look to get any shorter. It looks kind of consistent, actually. Secondary action. A secondary action can help emphasize a primary action. For example, the swinging of arms of someone walking. So I chose this cat because there's a lot of a lot of secondary action going on within here. So you can see he's just walking, but even within him walking, there's a lot going on. His body and head are bobbing up and down as he's walking, and in conjunction with this, his tail is doing the opposite. So as his head is going up, his tail is actually going down. And then you can see some more secondary action going on. His whiskers are going up and down, and you can see it in his eyeball too. He's also blinking every so often. So just keep in mind, secondary action can really, really help your animations if you're trying to convey a better animation. Timing. Getting the timing right gives animation weight, speed, and personality. For example, quick timing can convey high energy, while long timing creates slow movements. And this is what I was talking about before. You can kind of see that the consistency between these frames and these frames are not the same. And you can also see the animation between this one and this one is not the same. The top one feels a little bit slow and a little bit more robotic, while the bottom one has a little bit more lively action. You can see that in the beginning, like I said, the more frames you have, the slower an object goes. But the less frames you have, the faster an object goes. So you can see in the middle right here is when it's supposed to be the fastest, and you can see it's like it's gone. And in the beginning and the end, it's the slowest, which is where we most see it. Exaggeration, pushing movement further to add more appeal to that action. So here's a good example of this character jumping, right? No one actually in real life can jump and levitate there, but it just goes to show that emotional feeling that everyone feels like they have. And it gives that character emotional appeal. But sometimes as animators, we have to do unrealistic things to appeal to um, our viewers' emotions, right? For example, so here's another thing. Um, you can kind of tell that the shot, it looks really, really nice and really, really good. But if you look over here on the right, they actually had to do this is what's called deformation. They had to edit the skeleton of this character, and they actually had to drag it further away from the face just to get that perfect shot, right? And you could probably tell like the camera is probably somewhere here next to this mouse. My guess is that the FOV for the shot was messed up, and so these hands look kind of even looking at this character, the hands look kind of small. But to get this shot, they wanted the hands to look, I guess, consistent with how the animation was. So to get that consistency, they dragged her arms further away from her body to kind of get that good shot, and it looks good. But sometimes we have to break some of the rules to get that good shot. Solid drawing. Creating a three-dimensional character in a two-dimensional space gives the character weight, depth, and balance. See, this is what I was referring to in the beginning when I was talking about pose to pose and straight ahead. Straight ahead sometimes can get away from you because your drawings become inconsistent. But if you actually have a good solid drawing, then drawing straight ahead might actually make more sense for you. Um, and you can see that you can see these little circles and squares that are basically demonstrating the volume of the character and how it's kind of keeping consistency through the frames. And this is kind of what I mean by having a solid drawing. Um, so let's move on to the next one. Appeal. The unique quality that makes a character endearing, relatable, and memorable to the audience. So having a unique cast of characters that are, unique to themselves and play off of one another is very important when telling a story. So you can see this interesting cast of characters that, kind of I would assume kind of looks like the Croods kind of. You got like maybe some caveman or one-eyed cave woman and then a rat, maybe some mean uncle and an old lady over here, and maybe the father. Um, but it's an interesting, unique cast of characters that each have their own personality. Is what I'm getting at. So that's actually going to sum up the 12 principles. Just keep these in mind while we're animating, and you'll actually see some of these things pop up every so often. You'll be like, "Oh, that's from one of the 12 principles." If you want, I actually have a GIF of the 12 principles. It's just like a little PDF. You can download it. That's the one I like to use. It's a PDF with everything on it, and you can kind of just look at it and see how the ball is changing and moving, and it's just really good help. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much.